What is up? How is everyone doing? Okay, I'm going to break down how I colored this video from Arizona. So, I actually did this in 2 stages for a specific reason because I had to stabilize some shots. So, some shots I stabilized after coloring, and the reason being is because I want to add grain and whatnot. But if I added grain before stabilizing, you would see the grain shaking with the image, and I didn't want that. I wanted the stabilization to happen first, and then the grain and any other post products. Like it would have also made the windowing easier. So you can see here I have two timelines, and the second one you can see here. This is get ready. This is the main color. Yeah. And then in here we have the secondary color, which is all of our windows, some grain, and any other post processing kind of effects work. So let's go and break down the main color. So what we do from here is we begin by adding our CSTs. Well, first we obviously want to conform our colors. Make sure your color management is correct. I know some people do managed and they get more specific with input output and stuff like that. I don't. Maybe I should learn if you think I should learn. Also prefacing, I'm not a professional in the slightest. I'm a bedroom video maker. Okay, so I'm not a professional. I just think there's maybe some value that can be had by seeing how I did get the look of that video, and I figured I'd share. So yeah, DaVinci Intermediate, Rec 709, the usual. I'm sure everyone knows. We start by adding our CSTs. So the first CST is obviously our input. So we used a Sony. So we had Sony S Cine and S-Log3, and we make that and push it towards DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate. And then our output CST, which is from DaVinci into Rec 709. And then we're left with this. Cool. So now I obviously grouped certain shots that are very similar into groups so that I can save time. Like most of these outdoor shots are connected. I usually break up shots by either day or scene. So it's kind of up to your own interpretation. But you can see even a shot like this, from this to this was actually shot on the exact same day, but this is a wildly different lighting situation and shot. I didn't want to group it because I knew if we'll get into it later, but this turned out to be very blue, and I needed to push it back a bit. For shots that are similar, that need separate balancing, what I will do is I will put all my grade for every clip in the post clip, and any individual touch-ups I need to do, I'll do it in the clip level. You can see here, I guess, in this particular instance, I thought this shot naturally looked a little dark. So on the clip level, and to not affect the other clips, I decided to add a little exposure boost. And yeah. So we have our CST in and out. Awesome. From here, I did the usuals. You have your exposure. So as soon as I'm done my exposure, what I actually do is I skip my white balance, because when the image is this gray, it's really hard to tell what is supposed to be neutral and what, even with the graphs, what is white, what is black, and what is, if the colors are sitting in the right spot. It's impossible to tell without adding more contrast and saturation to the image. That's just that. So from there, I start with my contrast. I want it to be a soft roll-off. I want it to feel filmic, so I push those highlights down, I push those shadows up, and I give a soft curve to that image. And I do so like this. Now, this really doesn't add that much. This really doesn't impact the image, because I'm actually controlling my contrast with this dial as well, because this dial affects our saturation and luminance in our contrast, as opposed to if I were to adjust this dial, this is strictly just luminance. I kind of want to bring it back to earth after I just kind of punched it up, because I'm not looking to create a big separation between the highlights and the shadows. What I'm trying to do is reshape the tones of the image to feel soft and filmic. If we go to this example, if we turn all this off real quick, this is from my previous recording, which I fucked up. You could see before it's very strong, very in your face. It feels very digital, and we want to remove that digital feel. We don't want it to be digital. We lift up our shadows, create contrast through mid-tone to highlights and shadows, and we bring down our highlights. And that creates a lot more softness in the image, and it feels a lot more warm and comfortable right off the bat. From there, now we go to our HSV. This is just saturation. This I am selecting my color space to be HSV. I'm switching off channels 1 and 3, and I'm just punching in some saturation. It's almost like subtractive saturation. It gives very similar results. It just gives deeper color integration, but it's not perfect because you can't push it that far. You have to be very careful with how much you push it, and we're gonna get into how we get that really punchy color and the really rich, strong colors in the image. But just by cranking up your saturation, it's not gonna get you there. The first step, yeah, like in this, obviously needs more saturation, needs more life. So we give it more life. Okay, cool. Now, the reason you want to have your saturation either in a parallel or a node before you make your creative adjustments is because if I didn't have my saturation on and I started making my split toning and my hue versus hue and whatever adjustments I make to create something creative, I am playing with the colors I have here. Okay? But if I want some of those natural colors to come through and break through my grade, break through my split tone, I need saturation. I need those original colors to be brought up. The more muted they are, the more your split tone is going to take over the image. So we punch in some saturation. Okay. And just like that, we get some of the blues and purples in the clouds. It looks great. That orange really comes through. Okay, awesome. Now this is where it matters for order of operation of recreating what we did. Instead of going right to hue versus hue, this is not a suitable image to make decisions on where hues should be or what hues should look like. From here, we add our LUT. Now for the LUT, what I did was add Cullen Kelly's Voyager pack. I paid for this. Yes, I fucking paid for this. I believe I added Scorpio. I think I could check here. Yeah, Scorpio. Sorry. Okay, whatever. Because it's the most neutral. His other LUTs, not a big fan. They're very strong. They can definitely work in the right setting, and I'm sure you could dial them to be better, but I'm not really impressed with them, to be honest. I use this LUT because, for whatever reason, LUTs push your contrast in a place that's really hard to get, to be honest, from what I found, through sheer willpower and, adjusting your curves and other things. So I wanted the most neutral one. All I really wanted was that contrast, not necessarily the tone difference or the color difference or the hue difference, I should say. So that's what I did. And by nature of adding it, even still, it's pushing that sky into that teal, and it's flattening those oranges, and it's just creating pop, and it's separating tones where honestly it's hard to do. What I do from this point is now I want to introduce my color, and I use a color film profile, not a LUT, but a film profile in order to do that. And this is not my contrast, but now this is my color. From here, I found this through a YouTube video. It's actually a really nice film profile. It's called the Dormant Seed 250D film profile. I believe it was free. And you can see it's creating a very teal color profile. I wanted my skies to be teal. I wanted the overall image. When you look at filmic, I say filmic very loosely, but professional grades always have a sense of teal incorporated in them. Even when it's something that's supposed to pop, even when it's more punchy, it feels a little teal. And I never could figure it out. So I wanted there to be a sense of teal in the image. So I punched in this in hopes that it would give that teal look. And it's close to what I want. Okay, so now we're here. Now we can affect our white balance. So obviously this is very blue. Now we come back to our white balance and we introduce warmth. This is where we get some of that color separation back. This is where we bring that white back to white. I guess it's a little yellow, but that's okay. This second node, I don't recommend doing this, but this is I tried picking out some of those greens, and this is, I was playing with some of the hues along in a parallel with my white balance. So you can see I really picked out those greens. It's not a good idea because what you'll quickly see is colors start to block, and it will destroy your image. But I really wanted the greens to pop. I probably did this later in the pipeline, but I wasn't getting the greens to sit where I wanted them to. It didn't feel live enough, so I really pushed them by literally selecting them in the chroma warp and the color picker, the color slice, and my hue versus. You could see and then we have the normal hue versus, which is our hue versus. I don't think I affected saturation at all now. I'm using this node to shape colors, shape their luminosity, shape their saturation, and get them to sit where I want them to so that I can create more color harmony in this orange and teal color scheme I'm basically shooting for in this scene. Cool. And then we have our skin tones. Obviously, this is a secondary adjustment that you kind of go back to after you've made your creative look to help you with skins. I don't know. I have a feeling that this is not the professional way to do skin recovery or skin treatment, because I feel like this always gives me some artificial looking skin. I don't think this is the best way to do it, but I don't know a better way yet. So, yeah, skin adjustment. I'll turn this on later. We'll save that for later. Now, this is where I start to split tone the image. And I introduce, from this point, you already have what is creating a look, right? The image is very teal. It has a lot of teals. The sky, to the haze of the mountain, to the shadows of the image are the same color. They're under the same, you can see here in the waveform, they're the same hue. It's teal. That is creating a look. But now I want to introduce my own look. I really wanted those shadows to punch more blue. And I really wanted to see more yellow in the highlight. I wanted that sky to really pop. And I wanted the yellows in the image to really pop. So I introduced a split tone. I'm going to start with this one because this is the flat split tone. There's no other adjustments besides what's happening in our curves. Now, something you can see, I will activate it here. And you can see now those shadows are punching more blue. And now there's more yellow in the highlights, and it's creating more punch in the sky. We're getting something that is sucking us into the image more, if that makes sense. But you can feel it, right? It feels more alive. What you'll also notice is it's not just the colors that we're introducing, but it's also the luminosity that we're also affecting. We are introducing more contrast, and we are lifting up those shadows and bringing down those highlights more in this split tone node. And the reason I did that is because if you want, and this isn't a truth necessarily, but split toning will feel integrated if you also introduce more contrast as you increase your split tone. Without it, for whatever reason, from my experience, split toning doesn't feel natural. But if you introduce contrast first and then split tone from there, it will feel more integrated. And that is kind of the lesson I had to learn was it's hard to split tone without introducing contrast at the same time. And it'll start to feel like the colors are sitting on the image and not in the image. And that it bothered me for a very long time. So that's the lesson I learned that helped me split tone. If anyone struggles with split toning, that may be the thing you're doing wrong, or the area you're missing to make it feel complete. This is great, but I didn't think it was enough. I wanted to push the look more. Now, to get this poppy look, it's not a matter of just throwing saturation into the image, because it's going to look artificial. You can see in the greens here, it already looks artificial. It's going to look unnatural. It's not going to look right. If you want more color, you need to introduce more color. And what I mean by that is split tone more. Push those shadows to be a certain color more. You will get more richness out of the rest of your shot here, and you can see that here. And that has also, that also has to do with the contrast that I'm adding. Saturation is not the tool that's going to get you to those colors that pop. It's a mixture of all these tools. Because I'm adding contrast, because I'm adding blue to the shadows, because I'm adding yellow to the highlights, I'm getting more out of the rest of the image. And then from there, I can take steps to introduce more saturation. As you can see, I added another node here. You can see more contrast, new colors. Now the yellows feel pretty tame. Okay, so I'm going to add more saturation. We'll get to that in a second. But like I said, I wasn't happy with the split tone. I wanted to introduce more colors so that I could push those colors more. So I doubled up on the split tone. It's the exact same, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's any adjustment. Yeah. So you can see I pushed the split toning more. Now it's heavier on those blues, and the contrast, is heavier on those. It's doubled up. I controlled the shadows within this node because it was too prominent, too strong, and I knew I didn't want my blacks to start becoming uncontrollable or be in a place where they were untamable or I couldn't offset them later. So I had to, in this split tone node, control them, and I qualified them here, and I brought them back to warmth. If you see without it, you could see how lifted and blue those shadows are, but with it, you could see how neutral they become. They're not completely neutral. I didn't want to lose the blue that's in the shadows, and I didn't want to lose the punch of the color I'm giving. But in the darkest spots where it should be black, I want it to be closer to black. And what you'll notice by shifting those shadows back to something more neutral, you're actually adding more depth in the shadows itself. You can see how it goes from flat, there's no depth here, to now there's dimension in the shadow. It's rolling from darkness to the lighter midtones, right? Let's do it again. Yeah. So here's the wide of it. Yeah. So, but I qualified it because I only wanted to affect the areas that should be pure black. I didn't want to affect the haze of this mountain where it's blue. I didn't want that adjustment to get close to my midtones at all. So from there, now we have these bland yellows, this muddy muck looking blue. Nothing's sitting well. So I'm going to punch more saturation because I want those yellows to pop. I want this place to feel warm. Now those yellows come to life. We get more out of that blue. And now we're inching our way towards that cotton candy feeling look of the image we want. Okay, cool. Now we go to Tetra. Tetra is a DCTL that lets you adjust hues, kind of like hue versus hue, but instead of just shifting the hue of the selected area, you're introducing that color into that image. So it's more of a saturation than it is a shift. And you can see I shifted the blues to be more deep of a blue, shifted cyan to be more green, and what's cool about this Tetra DCTL is you could affect white, your white point of your image, and I pushed it to be yellow. You typically don't want to affect your neutrals because that's what's going to make your image seem healthy. But because I was going for something more painterly, something more pastel, I was okay with going buck wild with these colors. So I pushed yellow into the image to wipe some warmth into there. And you can see it just really, it does a lot. This is really one of the tools that's bringing the whole image together and giving it a sense of harmony. And you can see the mud, the ugly browns, and the washed out Windows XP blues of the image now become a nice teal, and the highlights in the sky go from white to yellow, and that's what we want. We want that feeling. The yellows of the grass and the foliage now become almost like they're kissed by the sun. that makes sense. But they're glowing, right? They're glowing now. They're not just sitting there, but they're glowing, and they're complementing the blue of the shadows more. And you can see that here too. The mountain becomes more teal, and the sky becomes more teal. It becomes a more suitable color for the yellow and warmth of the sun. And everything just starts to come together. So from this point, I added halation here instead of adding it with my other effects. I put it here because I felt like it was a core piece of the look, of giving that warmth and cutting that digital look, that I felt it was necessary to put here, and then have all the post-processing. I call it post-processing to sound fancy, but all the rest of the color grading happen on top of it. So I put it here. It's very minor, but it adds a lot. And you can see that here. It's just the edges are softened. It creates a glow, creates a haze, and the image just feels warmer because of it. And it cuts a lot of that digital look. On him especially, you can see, creates a nicer roll off. It just does a lot. And it also brings up exposure a bit, which probably isn't good, but there's a lot of probably not good in this video, but that's how I roll. Okay, now we have our offset, and this is helping the shadows. I don't think this is doing anything to the highlights, but this is affecting our shadows, because you could tell, even though I really like where this is heading, it is too blue, and I don't have any of that. Here's a great example of that. You could see, and to be honest, if I was going for something else, this could be a look in itself, and I could sit here and say I'm fine with that, because it's the intent of the look I'm going for. I want something that feels like a coloring book. I want something that feels like kind of unpolished and kind of like a storybook. So leaving those blues would be perfectly fine, but I wanted more life out of the image, more density and more control, and also more depth. And yeah, I just had to bring those shadows back to life a bit. But what I did was I qualified it again to be only affecting the deepest parts of the shadows, the center of this branch, not the whole entire branch, but like this pocket, but not these pockets where it's higher on the waveform. So we still have that blue, but the deepest parts again are dark. And again, I like how the green, because of our split toning, is turning the green from warm to cool, and it's giving that Miyazaki color palette to the greens, and it looks very appealing. So I just revive it a bit, and we still have some of that, It's not killing all of it. Here now, we're back to something more neutral, where we had very bold blues. I recovered those shadows, and I brought more warmth to that image because of it. Cool. And then from here, we have our our tertiary adjustments. So here, the image is looking great, honestly. It's looking pretty good. We're in a good spot. But now I want to do one little extra touch to push the warmth, to really give that heat, to make it feel like Arizona's heat. And this is chromatic adaptation, which is apparently a camera accurate way of, it's almost like adjusting your white balance in your camera to create a more natural looking warmth or coolness depending on where you go. So they'll both be set to D65. I just set my source to D75, which adds warmth. And you can see it pushes warmth in the image. And again, more color harmony now. So we push more warmth in the image. Now we're feeling warm. We're feeling like things are glowing. And that underlying color is now warm instead of blue. Cool. Now these two are saturation control. You'll see here, I'm pushing down the most saturated parts of the image and bringing up the least saturated. Here, I'm actually using Color Warper to, again, do the same thing. Just bring down those most saturated parts. I stamped the more neutral sections of the image, so I'm not killing the punch of the image, but I'm just controlling the saturation. I'm making everything feel more uniform. And then again, that'll help him feel more filmic, because no color is digitally punching above the rest of the image. And you can see I'll activate that, and it's not very noticeable, but you can look here. It is bringing everything back down to earth. basically. Cool. So we're slowly getting to that image. Now this is cool. This is one of the best tools I have ever discovered inside of DaVinci. This is the color tone diffuser. And this allows you to do 3 very sick things. First of all, bloom, pain in the ass to try and make. I used to always just add Film Look Creator because it had the best bloom integration or tool in DaVinci. It's very hard to create bloom otherwise. But the problem is you get this big ass effect for one simple thing you're trying to do, and sometimes I don't understand why this effect will kill your skin tones. You might be able to see it here. Even if I go clean slate, okay, no, it's not doing it here, but sometimes it'll nuke your skins for whatever reason, or your reds. It'll kill your reds, and I don't know why. So I just avoid it altogether. And this is the new secret sauce to creating bloom. And you do that with the diffuser here. Now what's cool about this is if you want that filmic softness, instead of going to sharpness and softness here and decreasing your radius or increasing your radius, whatever it is, you can create it by dragging your resolution down, and you get that soft look. And if you go here, you see it's softening the image, and I don't have to use the ugly looking softness, and it's so fine that from afar you don't even notice, but it's doing wonders. Again, it's helping cut that digital look. Now the second thing this one's doing is adding bloom. Oh my god, this bloom is so much better than the Film Look Creator's bloom. The problem with other bloom tools is it's either too in your face or it's too unnoticeable. This you can adjust. You can be so much better with. It's just, I don't know, it's better. These shots give it the best. Yeah, you can see it here. It's not in your face, I'm not blooming the whole entire skyline, or I'm not affecting just the hottest part. It really is wrapping around the subject perfectly. It's genuinely like it's perfect. And you can control that and dial that in however you want, but it's just adding so much brightness and warmth. It's creating so much feeling in the image. The second thing, I did 2 nodes, one for the bloom itself because I wanted to control. I didn't want the bloom to be dictated by the tone adjustments I made here, because you can drag your contrast curve up and down. You can bring those highlights down, you can bring that contrast up, but it never feels soft enough, and it never feels like the shadows or the highlights are controlled. You can introduce a flashlight into your scene, and suddenly your control from your contrast is being broken, and it's going above the scopes, and it's going deeper than the scopes, and it's separating your image even more, and it doesn't feel filmic or controlled anymore. And this tool allows you to actually clip highlights and clip your shadows, and you get to control it however you want. And you can finally create that softness in the shadows that rolls to the midtones and feels like it adds depth, but you can tell the shadows are lifted. Look at that. We can finally get that look with this tool. Now our highlights are no longer going wherever they want, but they're controlled. And now our shadows aren't punching as low and breaking below the graph, below 0. They're controlled. And we get that softness in the image, that smoky feel that we've been trying to get for so long, that the curves just never was able to give us. And the last thing this thing's able to do, I talked about that teal look in grades that always feels like it's there, but you can never really see it. You can finally do that. You can create a tone bias. And for these shots, I shifted it to be teal. So you can kind of see the teal in the shadows here. You can kind of see the teal in the mountain here and the back of here. Everything's pushed a little teal, but it doesn't feel like it's in your face. And it's hard to tell if It's a part of the split tone, or where you're getting those colors from, and how there's a sense of teal, but there's a sense of warmth, and it doesn't make sense. You can finally get teal, or maybe you want something more blue or red, to sit on top of the image and not completely have to change your color scheme for it. This is, I don't know, maybe I'm going crazy, but again, the color harmony is just, it's adding so much color harmony, and it's not reshaping colors. It just feels like it's almost a filter put on top is the best way I can describe it. And I just think it adds wonders. Okay, so we have that teal. We have that. Something else you can do with this, actually, I forgot to mention this, is tone light fall off. And this essentially allows you to add a vignette without adding the vignette itself. Basically means the adjustments you make in your tone lights and your soft clip and all that stuff is affected. If I were to turn this up, let's say, you could see how it falls off on the edges, and it creates, again, that kind of damaged film feel and that vignette feel, because what you're doing is you're allowing more depth at the sides of your image, more colors to punch in the sides of your image. This will help the gradient in the sky. This will help suck the viewer into the center of the image. It's just a good way to add a little bit more depth without anyone noticing. Okay, so then here we have a sun fix, because if we go to what's a good shot example here, you can see the sun is punching a little yellow, so we just undo that. Now here's some contrast pop. This is a pretty useful tool if you dial it in right, and you can just kind of punch a little more of those midtones to separate a bit more instead of affecting your entire contrast, and adds a bit more depth without affecting the softness of the image that you created so far. And you can see that here. Again, it separates those midtones. It gets more information out of the image, but you still have that softness. Delicate touch that's not digitizing the image. Here we have some glow. I'm not doing soft light. I'm just doing additive glow. And this is strictly to punch more vibrance and more brightness in the sky. We have our grain, which I didn't add at this point, and I'll explain why later. Then we have the final creative color adjustment, and I call this film print and print saturation. And then we also have more HSV-SAT, but the colors are feeling pretty good, but they're not necessarily punching right. It's not the color palette I necessarily want. Now we're too blue. Now we're not pastel enough. We're not punching hard enough. It just feels a little flat. So I call this film print because I imagine this being the last split tone that sending your digital video to convert to film to get some film elements out of that conversion process would create. And that would be more color, more artifacting, that would be more and whatnot. So I did one last split tone to kind of emulate that in a sense and to bring those colors closer to what I want them to be. And I made sure to change the decision making in the split toning to make sense for that. So I made sure to clamp my highlights and my lowlights because I didn't want to, again, offend the depth in the image. That was very fancy. But this time I wanted more teal in the mid shadows. And then I wanted to suck some of that red out. And this one I wanted more yellow in the highlights. But I wanted it to be closer to the mid highlights. So I made sure to clamp everything in the middle so I'm not affecting my skin tones. And it's vibrant. It's very vibrant. And now we're starting to feel how... Now we understand how we got so much punch out of the image because that split toning is now introducing, from this point, I can't just increase the slider of saturation because it's going to destroy my image. But what I can do is introduce more colors, more complementing colors that complement the scene, more colors that I see in my head to punch more saturation without increasing the saturation dial. So boom, now we have those oranges that are shifted more magenta. Now we have the sky that's shifted more yellow. Now we have the shadows that shifted more blue. See? Okay, that adds a lot. I shifted the image magenta because I wanted to now go in the opposite direction of how much green I was adding. So that's why you get that shift in the oranges to be more magenta in the road and stuff like that. From this point on, you can kind of feel, yes, we've introduced a new flow of color going from shadow to highlight, but we've neutralized some of those tones that punch, like the yellows and the warmth. But now what we can do, because we're at this point and we've kind of flattened the image a bit more, we've created more of that film print, we can punch the colors up again with more saturation. The way we did that is we used this node to reduce and flatten certain colors that are popping too much. Technically, the order of operations was this. I went to HSV again. I got my color space. I got my channels. And then I punched in the color. But you can see some of the orange is a little too strong. It's a little too in your face. The green is a little too much as well. And if we go here, we can see the skins are starting to get to a place where it's a little weird looking. So we went backwards one node, and we started to suck some of the saturation that we didn't want out, which is additive. So we sucked out additive. We brought some color density back in, and then we went in here to affect some luminance of skin, some hues of certain greens. Maybe we want to bring them into a certain palette one last time. And yeah, then we have the final image. Instead of the orange here being a block of orange, it has a little more depth, a little more neutralness to it. Okay, everything's looking good, but if you look here, you can kind of see some of the blues again are bleeding very blue. This will show it better. Again, you can see now we have a lot of cyan in the shadows that we need to undo again. So we just neutralize those tones again. But now we have more of the essence of what we were going for. And we have more, if we were to undo this, more life in the image. And you can see some of that readjustment of the film look brought those tones where we want them to. You can see how much of an adjustment this makes is insane. But yeah, this is really, these four nodes are what are making all the difference. It's what's separating those colors exactly where we want. It's getting that second life. Like you can see, we thought the blue in the shadows was blue before. Now they're very blue, but it still feels natural. How? Because we're doing that second film print. We're adding the saturation, and we're blocking off the deepest shadows again, while maintaining all the colors we added that feel integrated, that make the image feel integrated with all these colors. And that's what's creating that pop. You know, it's not just ripping that saturation slider all the way to the right. It's all these little steps that create saturation in the image. You know, it's bringing those greens to life. It's punching in the cyan and the blue and shaping the tones of the image that allow us to go from this to this, or this to this. So that's the difference maker, honestly. You can see it here too. So that's what I did for the first color pass. I did not introduce grain here. What I did then is I brought it back into Premiere. I did stabilization for some of the images, and then I brought them back into here. And then we did, I guess I should show the adjustments I made for the sky. So this is what the sky looks like after all the adjustments I made. You would think this is a done shot, you know, looks good. There's a lot of noise. I did some noise reduction, but I'm not going to add it for the sake of this. You would think it looks done, but after I did stabilizing, after I finished this pass, I brought all of these into Premiere. I stabilized the shots that I needed, and I re-exported, and I did a second pass, not of color, but I did a second pass of adjustments that I knew I still wanted to make. And you can see the difference from this to this is pretty big. It's pretty big. And this is a lot better looking. You can see this to this. Yeah. This I call the post-processing step. And all I'm doing is adding windows for depth. So let me turn all these off. I'm adding windows for depth. You don't even notice it when you're watching, but going back and forth, you can clearly tell, oh yeah, obviously he had a window here. The only shot you can really tell is here, and I wish I undid this, to be honest, because it looks really bad. Yeah, that's way too strong. Like, I'm a little disappointed that I left that in the video, but what are you gonna do? It's too late now. This helps add depth to the video, directs your eye to the points in the image that I want to see, helps make the image pop more. This is, honestly, windows are like a big difference maker if you're trying to make your image get that, get past that extra step. But then from here, I made certain adjustments that I thought would help certain images. For example, for this sky. So from this point, I have my selection of windows. So I added an exposure bump to the sky, to the center point of the image where I want you to focus. I added a vignette around the image to darken the rest of it. And then I added slight drop to the shadows. From here, we have a glow. This glow is to make this center point punch again. The threshold is very small. I only want to select part of the image. I really just want this line to pop. So I do that, and it adds a nice soft glow in the center. Then we have halation to really help the edge of this mountain because it still feels kind of digital. So I wanted to really give it that soft look, and you can see this is an extremely minor halation that's really only adding a roll off from the brightest points to the shadows. It's not doing anything crazy. Then we have a soft light glow, I believe. Yes. So this is soft light glow. This is just gonna help punch in more contrast. Yeah. This is what kind of wraps all that contrast together and that soft roll off. Looking at this, you don't think it needs it, but as soon as it's on, it's preferred. And you could even see there's some tones right here that are shifting from the red to the purple that look kind of burnt and ugly that you don't notice on the neutral image until you turn this on, and it creates that much better roll from red to purple. If I go back here, it feels, something that feels off in between here. So that just helps with that. Then here we have some saturation. So from this point in all of these shots, I made the decision to punch more color into these shots. So I went ahead and with the color slice, I added saturation, and it could be overkill, but again, I wanted that cotton candy Technicolor look. So I was like, let's do it. Let's throw more. Really, the shot that made me make that decision is this one, because I really wanted these pinks and these reds to pop. So I added that saturation. I was just like, after I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, I just need to add it to every shot. Even if maybe every shot doesn't benefit as much, I need this. Like, I need this to be in every shot for obviously to be cohesive, and just like, again, and we get to inch that saturation in a bit more, with each step, we inch more saturation into the final video. And this is where I wanted the red of the sun coming up to be more crimson instead of orange. I really wanted it to feel a little unnatural, but more breathtaking and more shaped. So I pushed it ever so slightly. Actually, I guess that's quite a bit, but yeah, I just felt like with the amount of purple in the scene, the orange wasn't reaching. It wasn't sitting, and it's because it's not complementary, right? These colors are not complementary of each other. So I wanted it to be red and purple. So that's what I did. So I pushed it, and you could just, that is like night and day. Again, like before, after, it's insane. Then we have lens flare, and this is something this is honestly something you can barely see. This is more for me, and it's a little psychotic, but just to give a little more light into the centerpiece. Light rays, all it does is, again, you don't have to use light. It's stupid that I even use light rays, but just to help brighten up a bit of the edges there. Yeah, and we basically gave this treatment to every shot. Here's another shot I kind of want to highlight. There's actually two. Actually, let's start with this one. This is the shot after our color treatment in the first pass. I mean, it's nothing special. Then we give the windows a pass. So we window, vignette, center point, classic stuff. Actually, this is the car. This is a magic mask on the car, to brighten it up. Then we have a color picker to, I think, we're basically introducing a gradient into the sky. I knew I wanted this to punch more orange, and I wanted this to go more yellow up here. So that's what I did, and it's worked out. Looks like a nice gradient. And then this is for the mountains in the back. Because now we're starting to get more purples in images, I didn't think red to teal to blue made sense. So I wanted to fix that and push this purple. So I just introduced purple into the back there. This is glow. This, I believe, is glow to help with the strip here. Yeah, you can see it helps with the sky, adds more density and depth. And this is another one. Yeah, it's really pushing up that sky to really pop. This is halation. You'll see it help very minimally with some of the hazing. You can see. Just cut out some of that digital edge. Okay, yeah, this is a color tone diffuser on overlay. I'm not sure why I did that, but it makes a big difference. Obviously, it's adding bloom, which is creating all of that red along the mountain side there, and along the cactus here, and it's just adding so much pop. Why I put it on overlay, I guess I must have just been flipping through composition modes, whatever you call them, and I just found overlay, and I was like, oh, that looks great. And then this is again the saturation with a little bit more custom saturation to reduce some of those tones. And yeah, this is before, this is after. All of these to do that. And I also want to show the sky. Okay, now this is what it looked like before. This is probably the shot that had the most benefit from the second pass, I guess you could call it. Obviously windows, cool. Contrast reduced. I probably did that last. Now, looking at the image, you can tell there's literally every single color on the color wheel in this shot that I wanted every single color to show. I wanted it to, again, feel like cotton candy. I knew I wanted it to feel like it's glowing. I wanted it to feel. So I had a glow. Soft light, I believe. Yeah. This is glow again, but with more saturation. And I don't know if I have it clamped to oranges. I don't remember why I qualified it, but yeah, that's more saturation or more glow. This is to shift. I wanted more pink. I wanted these parts to punch pink more, so I added more pink. I literally just added more. I qualified it, and I just pushed more pink with my primaries, and it worked. It looked perfectly fine, and it looked actually great. So I was very happy with that. And then we have a bit of a color fix. Some of the colors I felt like were breaking in some spots, so I had to adjust them a bit. Then again, we have our bloom and our color tone diffuser. That's helping, again, soften the image. It's just creating that heat and the radiance and summer feeling. This is our saturation push. More saturation with a window. I don't know why I did that. I'm going to be completely on. Oh, you know why? I wanted the edges to be more saturated. Kind of a weird, random. And then this is the color fix for the yellow that you can kind of see is breaking and turning green. I basically tried to heal it with a qualifier and a window. And it did help a bit, but yeah. So before, after. That's the shot that got the most love from the post second pass. And yeah, these shots, for example, again, like it's honestly night and day, but you would never, looking at the first pass, you would think these shots are perfectly fine the way they are, but there's always that extra little bit you can give it. Yeah. So don't neglect the use of windows or the importance of windows. Don't neglect the extra little bit you can push, and sometimes even a little bit more saturation. You can even push a little bit if you're trying to get for that punchy look. Like right along here, you can see how beautiful that cyan comes out, and the yellow in the sky, and yeah, the two-toning of the plant here between the yellow warm side and the teal and cyan dark side is just, it comes to life. It really comes to life. This is another great example of that. Yeah, this one is like, yeah, that's crazy. This literally made the image what it was. If I didn't do this, it would have been flat and dull and lifeless. And now this is alive, vibrant, and filmic. You know, there's so much more intent. Yeah, like, come on, look at that. Again. But it's not done, like I said. Okay, let's go to our final, I believe, is what we want to see here. So we added one last adjustment layer to the final project, and we actually used it to our advantage. So basically what's happening on this adjustment layer, all we're doing is going to our curves, and we're just bringing those shadows down. Because if you look before, look how lifted. What I find funny is you don't realize how lifted and how extreme or how flat sometimes your grade looks until you bring it into a different program with a different background and a different environment, and then you really look how much depth we're missing, right? And if you go to our scopes, you could see how far from zero we really are. Like I said before, we wanted it to clip, we wanted it to be lifted, we wanted that softness. And now that we have that softness, we can reintroduce that depth while maintaining the look and feel we've created by dragging the shadows down. Look how much more drawn you get into the image. Right? The focus is clear. We're still not at zero. We still have lifted shadows, but it feels so much more alive. So much more inviting. Now the subject of the image, which in this case is the clouds and the sky, are that much more interesting. Look how much more color we get out of this image just from dropping the blacks. That's how much more depth we get. Okay? Again, same thing here. Now, all these steps are your own filmic emulation because it's intent, first and foremost, that drives the cinematic feel. Look at the glow. That's integrated into the grain, you know? The glow's reacting to the grain. That's now reacting to the depth we've just added. That's now reacting, and it's same with the halation. And all these steps create an image that feels alive. Again, before, look how flat this looks. After, even in a shot with no shadows, look how rich the colors get just from dropping that shadow. It's night and day. Is a great example. A shot we looked at a lot before. And notice how our greens are no longer broken, by the way. I don't really know when that happened, but it just happened. It's all the mix of like the softness and the post print color. But look at the blues that come out of the green when you drop that shadow. So yeah, hugely important step was this last touch, and we used this to our advantage because we actually used it in the video. There's a clicking sound, and all I did was just cut off the adjustment layer to start there. So this is actually the original shot that you're seeing in the beginning, and then it clicks into the adjusted shot, which is just like Jesus Christ. And now all that information here that we don't want to see, that's not the attention of the show, that's kind of distracting, is gone as soon as we drop it. So yeah, that is that. I didn't show the grain. I'll do that now. The reason I'll show the grain is because I think it's important to the look and feel of the it's very tangible almost. It feels fuzzy and warm, but it's not distracting enough. It's very tricky to dial grain because it can be very distracting very quickly, and you don't want it to be. You want it to be complementary to the rest of the images in here, for example, you know, it's, see how it fades into the background and it becomes more prominent as the sky and the mid-tones of the sky come into play. But if we're in the foreground, it's not in your face. It's not prominent. It's not, it was hard to get that. But I'll show you how I did. I did a general pass on the entire image through the timeline. And I have 2 grain nodes. So the first one is more of a general pass. This is what's really giving you that texture that you see in the video, is this one. And the second one is more focused on the highlights, because the highlights are so high, it's hard to see any information, hard to see any grain in the brightest parts of the image. So I just use a second grain to kind of push it a little further in those highlights. And that also helps with the roll off from our center point here to our highlights. And you can see that. I also made it increase the symmetry, so it kind of creates a bit of an exposure boost. And it only uses bright noise to be a part of the grain instead of the dark spots. So it's not as, feels more fluffy and doesn't feel as blotchy. Now, grain. Don't be afraid to play with your composite types. Everyone leaves their grain on overlay. I'm going to be honest. Overlay sucks. It doesn't do a good enough job. Soft light, you get more pop. Hard light gives you something more sharp. If you're going for, you've seen a lot of grades recently where it's black and white and the highlights have this really strong grain, but it feels integrated somehow. Dude, it's just a matter of flipping your composite type and obviously dialing the settings from there. But start with your composite type. Maybe increase the opacity. See where you're at. This looks really ugly, right? This does not look appealing to me. Okay, maybe I want something that's only in the highlights that's very strong. Let's go hard light. Let's go symmetry brighter. Get rid of those ugly black spots. Let's go grain size smaller. Let's go grain strength stronger. Let's go softness a little softer. And now we're getting something with more texture. Look. And then we can go into our control here. Let's drop it from the shadows because we don't want that. Or maybe introduce it a little bit to the shadows. There you go. Your midtones can decrease a bit. Your highlights can increase all the way. Boom. This is what's going to help you make your grain feel integrated. Switch to composite type. Honestly, dude, it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. So that's basically what I did. Yeah. And that is the end. That's a long-ass video. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you sat through all that. I'm not a professional, like I said. I should have maybe been more clear and concise with this, but that's that. That's how I colored this video. No gatekeeping. That's the rule. No gatekeeping. It doesn't help anyone to gatekeep. And I'm not about that life, so